Welcome to Baha'i Books and Authors, a podcast which introduces to you writers and the works they've penned related to the Baha'i faith. We'll explore the inspiration, the process, and the stories behind their work. I'm your host, Jan Grammer. This podcast is produced by World Unity Media, which also produces Baha'i audiobooks. Children's books hold a special place in our lives. They shape how young minds see the world, spark imagination, and instill values that stay with us long into adulthood. A beautifully crafted children's story can nurture empathy, open doors to wonder, and provide a foundation of moral and spiritual understanding that readers carry with them as they grow. Jacqueline Mehrabi is an author whose stories have touched the hearts of readers all around the world. Her newest book, The Sweetness of His Love, Stories of Abdu'l-Bahá, draws us closer to the life and example of Abdu'l-Bahá, offering insights through moving narratives that inspire both reflection and action. Her writing is known for bringing history and spirituality to life in a way that feels both intimate and accessible, weaving timeless lessons into engaging stories for readers of all ages. I'm so pleased you could join us today and share the inspirations behind your work and the journey of creating the many children's books you've written. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. It's just lovely to be here.
How did you begin writing stories for children?
Well, like many people, when I had my own children, I used to write little stories for them and little drawings and colour them in. And then the Baha'i Publishing Trust of the UK asked me if I could write some 12 short stories for them for a book. We had so few books in those days. And I had all the ones I could find for my children, but there weren't that many. So this is really why I just wanted to be able to have something to read to them and make them sort of familiar with central figures of the faith, Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Bahá, and so on. I just wanted to share that with them while they were still little. So I think my very first book was these short stories, and that was in 1970. But I always liked writing. When I was 10, I had decided I wanted to be a writer. I sort of forgot about it after that. I did write stories about other children my age and things like that. So it wasn't until, as I said, my children were born that I put it into practice. It's been a joy. I've gained much more than anyone from doing it.
Well, I dare say so many children have benefited from those stories you originally wrote for your children. How many books have you written? I know you've contributed a lot of stories to various publications through the years.
I was reckoning there probably are about 18, 19 or 20 books, but a lot of other smaller stories as well. Some of them are waiting to be published if I get around to sending them to anyone. Don't know if they will or not.
Please do so. Please send those stories off so we have them. What do you see as the value for writing such beautiful stories for children?
All I want is for children to feel a connection with the faith and its history and its characters and the love and the joy that is there when you read them. I can do children's stories. I don't have to have written them, but I still get great joy out of it.
What inspired you to write The Sweetness of His Love?
Well, I think that it was knowing Mr. Faizi. We were on pilgrimage in the 1960s and the 1970s and the 1980s. And Mr. Faizi, the early times, he was sometimes the pilgrim guide. He was just so beautiful. He would tell these little stories that I'd never heard before. We were living in the Orkney Islands at the time, and the Hands of the Cause, used to write to isolated pioneers, and especially to the islands. So we had several letters from the Hands of the Cause, as did everyone around the world. So I told him about these stories that I was thinking of sending to the publisher, and I said, would he be kind enough to look at them first? Well, he was travelling the world at that time, and he wrote back and said, well, I'm travelling. And he said, but send them to me, and I'll have a look at them in my spare moments. He very graciously did that. He made one or two little suggestions, which I followed, of course. For example, he said I should use the word the master before Abdu'l-Bahá. So that was an interesting one. So I did that. It was just lovely. I can't thank him enough. We're so busy. I don't know how I had the temerity to ask, quite honestly. But my husband encouraged me to. In fact, it was his idea.
That's a very special gift you received, but you were also rendering such wonderful services in the Orkney Islands. Are any of the stories in The Sweetness of His Love stories that Mr. Fazey particularly told you?
There was one, but when it was published as The Sweetness of His Love, because it came out first just called Stories of Abdu'l-Bahá in another version, and I think it was in that one. But it was decided, because we couldn't find a reference for this story, apart from Mr. Fazey. But I can say what it was, because it's a very lovely story. Abdu'l-Bahá had several children who died when they were very young. There was one time one of these little ones had died, and the Muslim friends were coming to say how sorry they were, apart from the Bahá'í friends, to console him. Abdu'l-Bahá said, "Do you say that God is generous?" These friends said, "Yes, of course." And he said, "Do you think a generous person would give you something and then take it away?" So they agreed that that certainly was the case. And he said, "Well, if God is generous, he wouldn't give me these beautiful babies and then take them away again. He's just keeping them for me."
How very sweet is that. Thank you for sharing that. How did you pick these particular 38 stories about the Master in The Sweetness of His Love?
There weren't so many stories around at the time. There weren't all these pilgrim notes that we've got the bounty of knowing about now. Some of them came from the Dawnbreakers and our familiar books. They're quite severe, I feel, in some ways, because they're very heavy. They're so full of meaning. And to be able to convey this to children, it was a challenge because of the nature of the stories about death and difficulties and so on. But I just wanted the children to feel they'd been in the presence of Abdu'l-Bahá, sharing those experiences.
The book is full of stories deeply rooted in values, love, humility, compassion, and service. What do you hope the children and their families will carry with them after they read these stories together?
It would be lovely to think of the parents with their children reading these stories and experiencing them together, because that is a bond which really could last the whole of one's life. I don't know, really. I just want children to be aware of the richness of this faith. Like so many stories of Abdu'l-Bahá with his grandsons and the two little boys from America, which is one of the stories. It's a very simple story, really. Just Abdu'l-Bahá giving them a cup of tea. But it's that sweetness, that feeling that we are Abdu'l-Bahā's children, even when we grow up. It's not just a story about that happens to somebody else.
What was one of the greatest joys for you in writing stories for children, maybe as compared to writing stories for adults?
Children are so pure. They're so sweet. They're so pure-hearted. To be able to make that connection with them. One of my books was translated into some tribal language recently. And when I heard that, I just felt such a thrill, really, all through me, and such a warmth of love to think that there's these little children who I'll never ever see, whose language we couldn't speak anyway if we did meet. And they were learning about Abdu'l-Bahá and the love of the faith. I try to write the stories so that I'm not condescending or talking down to the children, but just by telling the story, the children will understand at whatever level they're at without having suggestions outside of that put in their minds. I'm not quite sure if I've answered your question, because it's a difficult one. All I can say is it's the deepest joy and the deepest love that I really can feel about all these children as though I know them. So it's such a privilege. Such a privilege. It's the thing that gives me the greatest happiness.
Your answer is perfect. This might not be a fair question or one that really you can answer, but do you have a favorite children's book that you wrote?
The trouble is with this question is that most of them are my favorite ones. Because they're so different. It's not just the same thing. But there is one, I tell you, and it's one of those ones where I don't feel I wrote it at all. I sat down to write something and it just came without any premeditation of where it was going. It's one of the ones, quite early ones, that's out of date, but it's called Song in the Ground. It's about a little girl and a little boy. The little girl is about 7 and the boy is about 9 or 10. They live next door. He's a Bahá'í and he tells her about faith, and it's about her reactions. It's also got a very rhythmic style that wasn't contrived. It just sort of came. It's very light, though he's talking about the whole history of, Baha'u'llah and so on. But it's the way the little girl just responds to it. There's one time where he has told her about Baha'u'llah being sent to the prison of Akka. And the next day he comes over into the garden and she's curled up in a ball. And he wonders what she's playing at. So he says, what are you doing? And she said, I'm a drop of the sea that carried the ship Baha'u'llah was on when he went to Akka. And it just came out. It enchants me when I read it, but not because I wrote it, if you know what I mean.
That book has been in my library for decades. You have a series called Discovering. What is that?
Oh, I was so pleased that happened. I think it was because by then, as my children grew up and became teenagers, then I began to write more for that age group. And it occurred to me that a lot of children, when they reach 15, they sometimes maybe don't even know what it is. But anyway, when they discover the responsibilities they have as being 15 years old, I thought it would be very helpful to have something they could read before they had to observe these things that were obligatory. Something was very important. And I thought it would surely help if they had thought about it before they had to do it, rather than just learned about it when they had to do it. I thought it would be interesting to set it in Orkney because I was comfortable in writing about a place I knew about, and I thought it was really interesting. The whole islands are really fascinating, and I thought that would give another interest in the book.
Over the years, has your approach to storytelling changed?
Yes, I look at some of the earlier books and I think, I'd have written that a bit differently or edited it a bit more, something like that.
What lessons have you learned along the way that you would share with aspiring children's writers today?
I would tell anyone who wanted to write children's stories to go ahead and be relaxed about it and just write it from the heart. I would tell them not to give up, and because it's not always easy to get them published, and to write with love, really. And I think you really can't go wrong. Not to hesitate and overthink how to do it. You can think of an idea of what to write about. But once you've got your idea, just write about it and be uninhibited about it, because once it's done, you can always go back and tweak it and, improve on certain things. But you shouldn't let anything stop you, because we can't have enough children's books.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from parents or from children who grew up reading your books?
Oh, that's been really lovely, some of the letters I've had from children. There's one which really touched me deeply. A Bahá'í in Africa, she was a pioneer there. She was taking a party of little children from one village to another, quite a long way away, and she hadn't quite reached the other village when there was a torrent. It was the rainy season and they had to run for shelter. They found a deserted hut and she went in there and they were stranded there. They couldn't go out for a few hours. She happened to have an early version of The Sweetness of His Love. She said she was so grateful to have it because they didn't have anything, sitting in this hut in this pouring rain. And she said that the children loved the stories. She just wanted to thank me. When she hadn't had that book, she said she doesn't know what she would have done with them.
It must feel very rewarding to get those kinds of comments, to see how your work, rooted in the heart, have touched so many hearts around the world over so many years. Thank you for all of your work and service and love and creativity and talent to share stories that are rooted in spirituality, in delight, in fun, and being meaningful as well.
Thank you. It's lovely to recollect all these things, just warms the heart.
The Sweetness of His Love, Stories of Abdu'l-Bahá by Jacqueline Mehrabi is available on Bahá'íBookstore.com or wherever you get your distribution services. Subscribe or follow Bahá'í Books and Authors with your chosen podcast platform. This podcast is produced by World Unity Media.